Greetings, Guardians, my name is Bife here. So, in a previous video, I touched on the lore of the speakers, those individuals blessed with the unusual talent of being able to hear the Traveler's voice. We talked about how our speaker, the one we know from Destiny 1 and Destiny 2 Vanilla, wasn't necessarily a charlatan, but was instead sincerely stating that the voice of the Traveler wasn't necessarily directed to him, but rather was often directed outwards and to a broader group of people than him personally, and oftentimes, people just weren't able to hear it. We talked about how the Traveler's voice tended to manifest in a series of lucid dreams for the speakers, especially back in the Golden Age when the Traveler was still alive, although back in the Golden Age, there was more than one speaker and they weren't referred to as speakers, but instead were known as dreamers. But the speakers aren't the only ones who've heard the voice of the Traveler. There are others throughout the system in our current times, and in various crucial moments in the past that have received visions or dreams, or even direct words from the Traveler, and they're also worth examining in greater depth. If we understand the way in which the Traveler communes with us, we might better understand the workings of its pale heart. And understanding the Traveler's mission also confers advantage to us. So, with that in mind, let's talk about the times when the Traveler has communed with us. But first, a word from our sponsors at Factor. If you're looking to save time in your day and cut down on the boring prep of cooking, then look no further. Factor meals are delicious, dietitian approved, and are ready to eat within just 2 minutes. They also have a bunch of different options, from keto to protein plus to vegan. So if you're on a specific diet, you can still get exactly what you need within their 35 weekly meal options that you can pick from. And you also get up to 60 add-ons each week, like snacks, breakfasts, and on-the-go lunches. For me though, the biggest convenience of Factor meals is honestly the time aspect of things. I am busy, and when I'm not busy, I'm not looking to hassle and stress myself with anything, not least food. And so Factor fits in perfectly with that. Factor is also cheaper than a takeaway option too, so if you're going to spend money on a takeaway to get some kind of restaurant quality meal at home, well, why not just spend it on Factor instead? So if you want to get yourself some Factor boxes, go ahead and check out the link in the description down below and in the pinned comment, and use code BIFEMAY50 to get 50% off your first Factor box and 20% off your next month of orders. Or scan the QR code on screen. Thanks again to Factor75 for sponsoring this video. So is there a common thread to do with the Traveler's communications with us? Well, yes and no. There are a bunch of individuals that have received communications from the Traveler through one means or another, and the communications themselves come in a variety of different forms. Mostly they are dreams of some kind or lucid visions, but that's not universally the case, and there is also seemingly no rhyme or reason to the people that receive these except for a few common traits. Keeping in mind all of that, there are a few people whose visions and communications from the Traveler we're going to investigate in this video. It's not an exhaustive list as best I know, but it's the list that comes to mind when speaking about the relevance of everything. That list includes the Ghosts, Clovis Bray I, Saint 14, Ikora Rey, Crow, ourselves, and perhaps most puzzling of all, Rolk, the first disciple of the Witness. Before any others, I want to go over that Rolk instance of potential communication, because it is something based a little in speculation. We don't definitively know that this is the Traveler, but it feels very much like it is the Traveler. And also because, compared to all the other times when the Traveler might have reached out to individuals, this instance is an aberrant one. It takes place shortly after Savathûn's throne world starts seeing the arrival of the Ghosts, and it is quite something. The first disciple was within his pyramid when a wayward ghost approached, searching for a light bearer that it could gift the light to. The exchange between this ghost and the first disciple results in Rolk trying to claim the ghost and pry the light from within. In this moment, a great booming voice responded. The lore is contained within the Raid Ghost shell from Valve the Disciple, the Imperious Sun shell. It reads as follows. Type: audio recording. Parties: 1. Ghost, designate unknown. 1. Error, missing data, error. Designate Rhulk. Associations: light, ghost. Darkness, Rhulk. Transcript follows. What is it? Ah, yes. One of Savathun's new curios. A fraction of that imperious sun. A facet of a sphere. A segment of adversary. Yes? Hello? As I told the assortment of arthropods earlier, I don't think I'm supposed to be here. Blessed ignorance. What of the past remains when all is wiped away? Only the gaps. Oh, no, I think you're confused. I'm new. Once. Stimulus response, writ large over the age of galaxies, and now asymmetry in fractal perfection. What turbulence mars your pattern? If it's all the same, I'd rather leave. Freedom comes in knowing the thing. Isn't that what she says? But you are unknown to the universe, to your creator, even to yourself. Isolated. Past. Present. Future. Please, don't remove that. I like the expressiveness it lends me. Have you spawned? Cast your spores to the wind, lone wanderer. What gametrophyte exists wherein they could partner? I think... yes, I believe I am looking for a partner. Leviathan under glass, but with it, perhaps a fraction topples the whole. Crack a facet. Crack the face. A sliver of light within. Ah, yes, there is. I am meant to share it with someone worthy. Rejoice. I have worth beyond worth. Disciple of the dark. Adversary. This one is not for you. Too bright! Nothing but scrap. They refuse to let their secrets be taken, only given. Poach another curious fruit from the witch's collection. They cannot, as a race, all deny our worth. Not quite sure how I was supposed to enact Rhulk being in a degree of pain when that guy inflicts so much pain with his donkey kicks, but there you are. Enjoy that little snippet of audio work. Not sure quite how to do that, but hey, commit to the bit, I guess. So, this entire entry is fascinating, not just because of the fact that it involves Rhulk, it's also fascinating because that voice at the end is listed as the ghost and it seems to come from the ghost, but clearly it's not, because it refers to the ghost as this one and says, it is not for you. So, yeah, it then seemingly explodes, or just crumples into scraps. Not sure what's going on there. It is impossible to confirm whether this is the Traveler speaking through the ghost or not, but Rhulk saying adversary is something that could really only mean two figures. Savathun, who he has constantly been a rival of, or the Traveler, who the Witness, his master, has been hunting forever. But Savathun deliberately doesn't enter into Rhulk's territory, and what's more, it isn't clear how she'd speak through a ghost in the first place, especially one that doesn't seem to believe that it should be in Savathun's throne world and hasn't chosen a hive as a guardian. So it appears that this could be one of the few instances of the Traveler actively reaching out to communicate with someone. And I mean actively here, because this does seem active. It is instant, it is strong, it is direct, and the Traveler generally doesn't do things like that. It's even stranger because of this. This is in a moment that is quick and lucid, it is not a dream, it happens with immediate power, and the intervention is enough for Rhulk to be blinded. So that seemingly has to be the Traveler. But that's odd, because as you might know if you watched my last video, the Traveler does not usually do this. It communicates through the music that it projects and any potential speakers that might hear it, or rather any dreamers that might hear it, and sometimes it will communicate with us through dreams, but again, this kind of intervention doesn't take place. Rourke's presence appears to be enough to literally violate the ideals of the Traveler to the point where it intervenes. It is something so irreconcilable that the Traveler breaks its silence momentarily. And that is seriously weird. If it was going to happen with any individual other than the witness, it does make sense that it would be with Rourke. If, of course, this is actually the Traveler. So with that said, what does a more typical communication from the Traveler look like? Well, we know what it looks like thanks to our own experience as Guardians. If you played the Red War campaign in Destiny 2, just after Gaul boots us off his command carrier, we plummet to the ground, and we're greeted by this cutscene, which is quite clearly a dream. We aren't dead in this moment, but we are knocked unconscious. And we see the following. So the vision here is actually a relatively important one for a whole bunch of reasons, but I think it stands out in this moment because as far as visions from the Traveler go, this is surprisingly direct. The Traveler's visions are almost always metaphor. When Ikora describes hers, as I'll go over in a minute, she talks about seeing crowns, candles that start bonfires, and silver trees. It's all very relative and filled with metaphor that's hard to parse and understand. But in this instance, the Traveler showed us almost as direct an image as it possibly could. Outside of the moment where it showed the great moments of the Golden Age and the arrival of the Black Fleet and the collapse, it does show us immediately what we need to understand. It shows us the Hawk, which we would follow, aka Lewis, and it shows us the power that we will claim by following it, which is the 3 new light subclasses that we get at the beginning of Destiny 2. In other words, the Dawnblade, the Arc Staff, and the Sentinel Shield. And finally, it shows Lewis flying towards a shard of the Traveler in the European Dead Zone. This was our message from the Traveler, telling us to find a way to reach the shard and that there we would be able to light the way forward. And of course, that is exactly what happened. It's not hard to see how this might have been the Traveler itself then reaching out in our dreams to enact its will, even if it had to do so through a broken fraction of itself. And it is again remarkable because it is unlike other communications, it is direct. This seems to be the moment where it is telling us its will, and it's also something that is to our mutual benefit. The Shard of the Traveler also highlights a few intriguing interactions that this thing has. Between the EDZ Shard and the Shard found in the depths of the Hellmouth in the last Hive mission on the moon of the D1 campaign in Vanilla, it's clear that these shards all share a direct connection to the main Traveler sphere. They are all a part of the same whole, meaning that interfacing with one leads us to be able to interface with the Traveler generally. So if there are any other shards just lying around like in the EDZ, it's worth keeping them in mind because they might be conduit points that allow us to commune more easily. As Guardians, it's perhaps not surprising that we would actually get a moment like this where we communed with the Traveler and it was quite direct, but it's neat to know that this isn't the only time it's reached out to us. In particular, there was an instance that started alongside Ikora Rey. After the passing of Cayde 6, Ikora had a dream, a vision of sorts, and we too would have visions. Her visions were noted to be of crowns, roses, silver trees, and candles turning to bonfires. Take a listen to what she says in Forsaken just before you enter the Tangled Shore.
As for Zavala, he would cling to the broken pieces of the future he imagined until they crumble in his hand. He hasn't seen what I've seen. Ever since the Traveler woke, it's been speaking to me. Visions of crowns, roses, silver trees. Candles that turn into bonfires. And I'm not the only one. If you see something new, don't be afraid to pursue it. I wish I could help you more. But the city needs a unified vanguard. Or at least the illusion of one. And this is your road now.
Ikora encouraged us to pursue this lead, and it would bring us to Io, where we would have one of our most direct and remarkable encounters with the newly reawakened traveler. It spoke to us through visions of light that manifested on the surface of Io as trees in need of purification and corruption. Take a look and take a listen.
I understand your visions have taken the form of trees. I've seen them too. I went back to Io for answers. The last place the traveler touched. Io will react to your arrival. If you let it.
I put us down right in front of the crater where the traveler touched Io. The Vanguard maps have it marked as Last Eden. What was that?
Whatever you saw was for you and you alone. The traveler is speaking to you. Eyes up, Guardian.
Devotion inspires bravery. Bravery inspires sacrifice. Sacrifice leads to death.
These are different from the other trees we saw.
These visions are constructs of the traveler's light, and light reacts to its surroundings.
Arden grows in both directions. It grows into tomorrow and yesterday. The red flowers bloom forever.
The Taken can see the trees. No, they sense the light.
The Taken are weeds, Guardian. Pull them up.
You might have been kings and queens of the deep, but you have toppled orders, and you have not replaced them. Humanity must have protectors. Will you stand with me? Even the stars are brighter. The whole cosmos is ablaze.
The Traveler's been alive for a year. Why has it waited so long to speak to us?
The Traveler gave you a vision even before its rebirth. When Gaul blocked its light, the Traveler showed you a path forward. The road to recovery is long. But when we grow stronger, so too does the Traveler.
The light lives in all things, in all things. You can not even try to trap it, but the light will find its way. And the Traveler will defend it.
Congratulations, Guardian. Remember, when we channel the light, we connect to something much bigger than any one of us. Even departed sparks, like Cades, still leave a trace in this luminous web we call the light.
Eventually, these visions would lead us to the Grove of Ulan Tarn, where we would recover a seed of light. That seed was powerful enough to kindle new abilities within our Guardian. More importantly, it was one of the few times that the Traveler had directly reached out to us in a manner like this. These visions, these communications were more than just dreams. The Traveler's voice was audible and clear as we purified each of the trees that led us to the grove. However, it never used its own words, not truly. Each time it spoke, it would only manifest the words of characters from Destiny's past. some of whom we've met and some of whom we have not. It manifested the Speaker when saying that devotion inspires bravery. It manifested Toland when saying that we had toppled Oryx and not replaced him. It manifested the Warlock Pujari who had explored the Black Garden when stating that the garden grows in both directions. It manifested the Iron Lord Radagast when stating that humanity must have protectors. And it manifested the Iron Lady Aphrodite when it said that even the stars were brighter. In this most lucid of communications, a moment where we were able to more clearly parse what was being said, the Traveler wasn't able to reach out and speak directly to us. It could only use the words of those that had either wielded the light or heard its voice. Perhaps this is a reflection of the manner in which the Traveler is able to reach out and how it changes based on proximity with those things that have been affected by the light. Artifacts of importance or places of relevance, such as the cradle on Io, might be key to communing with the Traveler. After all, Io was one of the greatest sites of the light's purpose, the last place the Traveler touched. As we experienced these visions, we saw the light radiating out from the cradle in great waves. The Traveler's strength here was undeniable. So perhaps it's possible that as the Traveler gets stronger, our communications with it could become clearer if we return to places like this. If that assertion is correct, then within the Pale Heart we should be able to hear it speak like our friend at our side. And it does bring me back to that voice from the trailer that we heard near the end of the Vidoc that Bungie used to show off the gameplay of the final shape. The one that said, "Take this power, Guardian, be brave in dark places, for we are the light of hope." Perhaps as we get closer to the light's source, we'll actually be able to hear its call for ourselves without restraint. Perhaps the Traveler's voice will manifest completely and clearly. It did also clearly state its goal. It will defend itself and it will empower us to do so. After all, it's not the first time we've seen this happen. Crow also experienced a dream of his own, dreams that led us on the path to Hawkmoon. And make no mistake, Hawkmoon as a weapon is remarkable. It turns out, and we know this thanks to the quest, that Hawkmoon is a weapon that was recreated in Destiny 2 from the base of the original, but the actual materials used, the effigy of Hawkmoon that we were originally gifted with by the Traveler, it's something made from the flesh of the Traveler itself. It is as close to a divine weapon as one can imagine. This all starts when Crow experiences his own dreams, dreams that lead him on a path to Hawkmoon with us at his side. This all comes after we experience a strange series of events where we need to gather paracausal feathers from around the system. But for Crow, it all begins here.
Do you have a minute? Something's been going on and I've been having these strange dreams lately. Vivid. Real. Glint thinks there might be something to them. I'm flying. There's a green forest, mountains, European dead zone, I think. Sometimes the clouds part, and where there should be a bright blue sky, there's just darkness. I'm free, soaring toward a distant pillar of light, but the dream always ends the same way. That light flickers like a candle flame and goes out. And then there's nothing. I can't shake it. It's all I think about. Would you come with me? See if anything's there.
We followed Crow and investigated the EDZ where his visions took us. Eventually it led us to a spectral hawk, and like the one that we had seen all those years ago at the start of the Red War, we pursued it. And as we did, strange things began to happen.
Do you remember anything else about your dream?
Someone was calling to me, but I couldn't understand. It sounded like they were underwater or down a long tunnel. Then nothing.
Did you just hear that?
Affirmative.
Did you notice the way the sound scatters in spectral analysis?
What? No, But that's... It resonated on the same frequency as the Traveler. That hawk. It was made of the light.
It was real. The dream, the bird. I don't understand how any of this is possible.
Guardians don't experience visions of their past lives. But there are historic records from the Dark Age detailing visions experienced by survivors of the collapse.
What were the nature of these visions?
They varied, but the most widely held belief is they came from the dormant Traveler, like the survivors were experiencing its dreams. If it dreams.
We followed the signal and the hawk to its source, and what do you know? The source was a shard of the Traveler. Again, perhaps showing us that these shards are locuses for its communications. Take a listen.
A piece of the Traveler.
I don't think it's a coincidence that the Taken are so active here.
Savathun?
She knows about this. Has to.
I know this gun. It looks like Hawkmoon. Or at least part of it. I thought it was lost forever when the Red Legion destroyed the tower. No. It's an effigy of Hawkmoon. Made from the same material as the outer shell of the Traveler. This reminds me of the gift the Pyramid left us on Io. The one Eris transformed into a weapon. But it's undeniably of the light.
My dream, the bird, the voice, calling to me as the darkness closes in. It's not a coincidence. It's a message.
Are you suggesting the Traveler spoke to you?
This may be the only way a paracausal entity like the Traveler can communicate with us.
Why me?
I've always believed in my purpose as a ghost. We are all part of a broader design. Now that the Traveler's awake and whole again, that plan is set in motion.
I don't know if I want to be somebody's cosmic plaything.
As we continued to investigate the visions from Crow and the Hawkmoon that the shard of the Traveler had created, we saw that the effigy of Hawkmoon was restoring itself through our actions and before our very eyes. It was being empowered by our light. As it was starting to be reforged, Crow said this to us.
Hawkmoon is transforming before our eyes. Every step we take, it changes, grows stronger. On our way back from the EDZ, I remembered something else. A dream of a dream. You were carrying the effigy. It was simply radiant, charged with a power I've never felt before. We were taking it to the shard of the Traveler together, and then... I don't know what happens next, but we are going to find out.
We continued to follow the paracausal manifestations of the Traveler, and our ghost put forth the idea that these manifestations were a result of the Traveler attempting to communicate through metaphor, leading us in the right direction. And eventually those metaphors led us back to the same place we had explored before, the Hallowed Grove, where the shard of the Traveler could be found. As we cleared the Taken infestation, we saw more hawk-like manifestations of light, and eventually we would reach the same shard again. However, we were prevented from interacting with it by Taken corruption, which was slowly consuming the shard. When we succeeded in clearing it, we saw Hawkmoon begin to resonate with the shard, and we communed with the Traveler again. Though this communion was interrupted by a Taken commander, we were still able to manifest and claim a functional Hawkmoon for ourselves in its completed form. When the Taken were defeated for good, Crow had begun to unravel more of his journey and his purpose, and after multiple excursions back to the shard, and after defeating the Taken over and over, Crow would finally see his place in all of this.
The Traveler brought us together to rebuild Hawkmoon. We fought Savathun's Taken. We channeled the light. And we turned something dead and gone into something beautiful.
Reforged in the light. For a purpose.
I think I understand what mine is. I'm not just a light bearer. I'm not the man I was before.
He's gone. Forever. I'm an instrument of the Traveler's will. I'm a guardian.
This communication seems to have had even more of an important purpose, because Crow has turned out to be a key ally and the linchpin of our plan to enter the Traveler's pale heart as we pursue the Witness. It'll seem a little canned to some, but in this instance I think it'd be fair to take a saying from Mithrax and note that the light provides. With that in mind, we can perhaps understand that when the Traveler reaches out in such a direct manner as it did with these manifestations, it is doing so with a direct goal and a purpose in mind, just like it did when it empowered us at the Grove of Ulan-Tan. In the meantime, though, we're still able to get glimpses into the Traveler, and that's thanks to other characters in the setting. I am, of course, talking about the ghosts. You hear it a lot from them over the 10 years worth of lore that we've had, but the ghosts are attached in a manner to the Traveler. They are fractions of it. They were created from its death, and they are able to sense the Traveler. It's something which isn't stated often, but when it is, it's stated very clearly. They can feel the Traveler's presence, and they can feel how it is. This is confirmed by our ghost and by Amaru in the year's worth of content that is released since Lightfall. Here are a few lines that will help confirm that notion, that they are able to tap into the Traveler and understand it at least a little bit.
I can still restore you, Guardian, but I don't feel that comforting presence of the Traveler behind me when I do. The light still comes, but it's from somewhere deeper, if that makes any sense. Before, I couldn't imagine why these Cabal would throw their lives away for a momentary thrill. But ever since the Witness, since the Traveler's battle with the Witness, there's this empty spot inside me. I'm beginning to feel like I'd do anything to distract myself from it. I'm glad we're still helping the Neomuni, but part of me feels hollow without the Traveler. It's always been a presence within me before. I was angry when I discovered it gave the Hive the light, and confused, but I never wanted. We have to find out what the Witness has done. This is more exhausting than it used to be, like drawing water from a well instead of a tap. Did losing the Traveler take something vital away from me? Or am I still just sad? Seeing these gutted machines just takes me back to the Traveler, and watching the Witness just dissect it. I can't shut it out. I worry, Guardian, that I'm nothing more than another machine like these games. I haven't just switched off, like during the Red War. Is that because I'm a person? Or am I just plugged into something else now? But I suppose a game machine can't feel the absence of its creator.
Your ghost said the Traveler's been quiet lately. That's not exactly true. I think he's sparing you the details. The Witness is doing something terrible to it. I can sense it in my light. Listen, imagine your god spoke to you, and all it did was scream for help. Yeah, it's kinda like that. You might have heard some ghosts saying they can't feel the Traveler after what the Witness did to it. Now, don't get your hopes up. I can still sense it. But something's changed. Look, I know the Hive. I know death when I feel it, and this doesn't feel like death. This is more like desperation, tension, terror. See? I told you not to get your hopes up.
The intimate connection the ghosts share with the Traveler shouldn't be surprising. They are small parts of it after all. But the fact that they can hear it at all is... But the fact that they can hear it as intimately as Imaru describes is highly disconcerting in this moment. Unfortunately, they aren't able to tell us more that we don't already know. The Traveler is imperiled. This much has been clear since the witness carved the portal into its flesh. Those are some of the most high-profile instances of the Traveler's communications, but there are some that leave us with a little more confusion, and I think the communications it made with Saint 14 are close to the top of the list. Now, keep in mind, when discussing an Exo's dreams, there are some special addendums that need to be added. They are Exos, so they don't dream in the same way humans do, but they do still dream, and when they do, they tend to universally dream of the Deep Stone Crypt. Not the one that we know of on Europa, where they were actually created, but instead a tower in their dreams where they were born. A tower that they must fight toward, lest they should be lucky enough to be one of those rare few Exos that experience a more peaceful version of these dreams, where they're walking through a field of golden millet and have nothing but tranquility at their sides. Saint is no exception to these dreams. Take a listen to a few quick excerpts from him.
Guardian, the Deep Stone Crypt. It is truly on icy Europa? But what of the golden fields in my dreams? The Deep Stone Crypt. To enter in a dream is bad enough, but to do so in reality, what you must feel. If you wish to talk, I am here.
In particular, there is one dream relayed to us from the Deep Stone Crypt raid armor that is worth noting. It's a dream from Saint 14's perspective, and it features an unknown feminine figure. It's found in the Legacy's Oath Titan mark, and it reads as follows. I know who I am. I am a Titan. So long as I am able, I stand between the lost city and those who would tear it down. Saint 14, like most Exos, dreamt of the Deep Stone Crypt often. The golden field, the looming black tower, the battle below, surging with faces that were eerily familiar. He was used to these dreams, like many of his mechanical kin, and resolutely uncurious about any deeper meaning. It couldn't be anything good, he reasoned long ago. Besides, his waking life kept him more than occupied. However, since his return from the kaleidoscope depths of the Infinite Forest, the dreams had increased in frequency and in eeriness. For the first few weeks, instead of battle, he faced single opponents in duels. Osiris, Marin, Zavala, Anna, even the Guardian who rescued him from the Vex. No matter whom he fought, he would use all his energy and light in the fight and lose every time. Flat on his back, he would look up at the tower and know that someone was watching from within. The night before Rasputin alerted everyone of pyramid ships entering the system, winter fell on his dreamscape, forcing him to charge through pillowy snowdrifts at a massive winged Vex unlike any he'd seen. He lost that night, as he would for many more nights, watching as an iridescent liquid, almost like Vex milk but different, contaminated, flowed from his every joint, sizzling in the snow. During the waking day, he maintained his usual exuberance, taking great satisfaction in helping Guardians hone their craft in the trials of Osiris. After all, the fights happening in reality were the ones to focus on. Why worry about what he can't control inside his head? But then, the night before a new vacuum of grief was opened in the system, a woman appeared at the threshold of the tower. Her clothes were black, her hair prematurely grey. She watched, arms crossed, as Saint hurled grenade after flaming grenade at the Vex with little effect. "You'll blind yourself with all that fire," she tutted. "Maybe then you'll finally learn to look instead of see." In one mighty swipe, the Vex cut down the Exo. The woman sighed as Saint crumpled to the ground. Silence fell, followed by the crunching of footsteps in the snow. "Just like your father," she said, kneeling by his head. "All of you." She laid a hand on the fore of his helm, as if feeling for a fever. "In your next life, you should take more after me." With that, her hand slid down to his eyes, and for a brief moment before he woke up, all was dark. Now, there are dozens of different ways that one can interpret that vision, but one of the most interesting and compelling in my mind comes from Venextran. I don't want anyone to sit here and believe that any assertion that he or I makes on this topic is completely correct, because the reality is that we just don't know what these visions truly mean. However, I'm referring to Venextran's idea because I find it compelling, and that idea is that this might well have been a communication from the Traveler, and it might well have been a feminine form that is commonly referred to throughout the lore as the Gardener. For those of you not in the know, the Gardener is a figure mentioned in a lore book known as Unveiling. It's part of a creation myth that involves two figures, one of Destiny's only true creation myths. One figure was sort of similar to the Traveler and the Light, and she was known as the Gardener, a bringer of life and a beacon of hope. But the Gardener had a companion, another half, a foil that would be at her side, the Winnower. And the Winnower represented death and simplicity, the wiping away of all wasted life. The Winnower and the Gardener both disagreed on the nature of the game that they played day in, day out, a game that resulted in similar patterns arising every time, an outcome that the Gardener disgusted. They fought and brought down the Tree of Silver Wings in the garden before time that they had occupied together. The Gardener might be who is represented here. She's dressed in black, almost as if to signify mourning, and her hair is noted as prematurely grey, implying that the hair should be vibrant and perhaps has changed due to the onset of stress. The figure then tells Saint 14 that they were like his father. Now, that note of like his father is important because the Winnower is always portrayed as a figure with masculine pronouns and is associated with the darkness. The continuous choice of violence is projected by the way of the Winnower. It's something which the universe has seen manifest many a time, according to the Gardener. The Hive know it as the sword logic. It is the simple idea that the strongest thing that survives will persist and will exist forever, because that is the shape of the universe and the way it is. This is something that the Gardener has always lamented, because it leads to similar forms of life every time. The Gardener seeks a different way, and perhaps especially for her children. So maybe in this moment, as she stands over Saint, checking him almost for a fever, almost as though he is sick, she is asking him instead to choose peace over war, because that is a way that the final Winnower's shape will be avoided. And keep in mind, the final shape for the Winnower is not the same as the final shape of the Witness. This is really hard to confirm, but some pieces of it do make sense and fit together over time. In particular, Saint would follow those lessons when concerning himself with his most ancient adversary, the one that he is most well known for, not the Vex, the Fallen, or the Eliksni as he would come to know them. He would find peace and even friendship with them as time progressed and as they learned to live side by side with each other in the Last City. The Season of the Splicer portrays these events in their totality. And perhaps this was the will of the Traveler. Its word to him at the end was simply asking him to reach out with an arm of peace instead of a fist of war. It's a communication that is still confusing and not very clear, but I think it's worth keeping in mind because Saint is one of those characters that must be one of the most powerful guardians in history, and his impact on our story as a collective society within the Lost City has been enormous. Finally, though, for our explorations of the Traveler's communications today, I wanted to look into what I think is the most confusing one of all. The Journals of Clovis Bray I, and in particular the second half of the logbook that was lost, the logbook that records his adventure on Europa, the adventure that would claim his life. The entry in question is a distressing one when you understand the context of it all. It involves Clovis Bray being sent in for surgery. He had basically seen organ failure en masse, but he'd prepared for that part. There were a bunch of different moments where he had had pigs brought with him to Europa, and those pigs had been killed and their organs had been prepared for harvest. Those organs would now replace his dying ones and he would continue to live on. There was an automatic surgery frame that would take care of him. The problem was, it was corrupted by the Vex, and they laid out his entire body, ready to be tortured. If he wasn't saved by Elsie Bray, his monumental pain would have been beyond legendary. However, after this moment, Clovis Bray I briefly falls into a dream near his own death. It's here that we see another metaphor, one that Clovis is playing out his part in, and here Clovis sees a figure of sorts, one that changes our perception of everything. Clovis sees a wolf, an Alpha Lupi. This is another form of imagery that is commonly associated with the Traveler, as can be seen in the exotic Crest of Alpha Lupi chest that one can get on Titans and back on Hunters in Destiny 1, and more importantly, on the Yalahorn. This Alpha Lupi communes with Clovis Bray, and is a feminine voice once again, just like in the dream of Saint 14, just like the Gardener. Take a listen. Note 3rd, Vision. Something else happened while I was in surgery. It returns to me only now that the anti-traumatics have eased the terror of Sundaresh's presence. While I was dead, I had another vision. I was with Clovis II's mother. She was a wolf, and one of her eyes was a star. I was also a wolf, and I knew that I was the Alpha, the false Alpha, the pack leader who fights for dominance and rulership, a misconception created by bad research. In the wild, wolf packs are families, and Alpha simply means parent. Wilhelmina told me that. She was the true Alpha. She was the mother. I was not the true Alpha, because I was not a true father. I panted at her. My muzzle dripped blood. She looked down sadly at the mess between us, and I realized that in my raging need to prove my dominion, I had savaged our cubs. I had killed little Clovis II. I had killed Alton and Wilhelmina and Anastasia. I had killed Elizabeth. I whined in dismay. The Alpha Wolf stared at me with one sad wolf eye and one bright eye that dimmed and grew with the exact flux of a variable star. "What did I do?" I asked her. "Why did I do this?" She lay her head down in the bloody snow and looked up at me. She seemed weary. She had seen this happen many times before. She had seen many of her pups murdered by wolves like me. The voice of Clovis II's mother came from her jaws. "You did the same thing someone always does. You saw that there was plenty and gathered it to yourself to make yourself one above all others. And when others threatened your plenty, you struck them down to keep your own station. You grow the enemy in my garden and eat of its bitter fruit. Each time I hope it will be different. Each time I lose a little of myself as the bitter fruit blossoms. Now that fruit will flower in you and in all your people. I do not want it to happen. I want anything else. But the choice is not mine." "Why didn't you stop me?" I tasted blood on my long tongue. "Why would you let me do this?" She blinked sadly at me. She had been trying. I hadn't listened. "You never said a thing to me," I snarled. "Not once. You never told me I was doing wrong. At least Clarity sends me dreams, the exo-body and the eel, and it shows me what I can become." "You think Clarity sent those dreams? Why would it speak to you when you are dead and furthest from its influence?" "Liar!" I howled. "You never did a thing to help me. Not when my son died, not when my granddaughter fell ill. I had to do it all myself. You never even spoke." "The best voices," she said, with infinite grief and unending hope, never let themselves be heard at all. This lesson is worth teaching again and again. The choice is never mine. It is always yours. The Alpha Lupi seen here, the Alpha Wolf, seemingly is the Gardener, or the Traveler. Clovis represents many of humanity's worst impulses, but all the time here, I think he represents two above all others, which is selfishness and a lack of self-awareness, and both these traits together have doomed him. The Traveler made it clear that the pain he has suffered is all of his own making. It's all his own fault. But why the Traveler specifically reached out to Clovis Bray I in this moment isn't made clear to us. It wasn't forcefully trying to prevent an intrusion on its own light like with Rolk, and it wasn't guiding us through visions and metaphor like with Saint, Crow, Ikora, or us. It was instead perhaps simply trying to show Clovis the error of his ways, errors that he could only have learned through the Traveler's silence, because in no other way would the lesson truly have been learned but by failing to learn it. Failure is a great teacher after all, and when it comes to a lesson such as this, maybe there was a chance, even briefly, that Clovis could have pulled everything back from the abyss and redeemed himself. Perhaps this represents the Gardener desperately trying to stop what it had seen so many times before, the plundering of the metaphorical garden of the universe for the benefit of a single person, the accruing of strength until that strength was by its nature turned into dominance over others. It's hard to tell. Clovis Bray's thoughts on things are seldom reasonable, and it's often not easy to pass the understandings of the Traveler either. Regardless, the notice and mention of Alpha Lupi is unmistakable. This must be the Traveler in some sense. Needless to say, these aren't all the varied communications that the Traveler has given us over the years, but this handful does show us a bit of the Traveler's intent, and this I think is part of my final thesis. I think that it's been quietly guiding us to grow in power and strength so that it can steer us from the winnowing path, and it perhaps has been attempting to keep ghosts out of the hands of the disciples of the Witness as well. All these things are converging upon the final shape, and perhaps this is where the designs of the Traveler are starting to become clear. If we've always been in the Traveler's plans, then perhaps that's why it sent the vision of the Shard of the EDZ to us, so that we could defeat Gaul and ultimately reawaken it. If that is also the case, then maybe it's why it sent us to Io, to gain a seed of light and learn our new supers. And with that in mind, maybe it was the Traveler's intention that we should kill Uldren Sov, so that he would be resurrected as Crow, a Lightbearer. All that so that it could then send Crow messages as well. Messages that would inform his intent to become a guardian and to be an instrument of the Traveler's will, thus leading us to the Hawkmoon quest and his affirmation of his purpose in the universe. All of that so that Crow might one day know his place, to jump through that portal created by Riven and allow us to enter the Traveler's pale heart through the bridge that he would form. Purpose is a hard thing to discern from the Traveler's communications, but I think that purpose might be clear at last here. The Traveler has perhaps always intended for Crow to be her contingency, and if that is the case, and if he is to be our beacon that guides us into her heart, maybe all of this, all of these communications were a part of the plan. A plan to ensure that she was defended and that all of her creation would not fall into ruin. Ruin that would finalize reality into a shape that will never grow again. But that's all from me for now. Thank you so much for watching, and please do let me know, are there any other communications from the Traveler that I'm not mentioning in this video? There are 10 years worth of lore and story things that I could bring up, but ultimately these are the ones that felt relevant to me, but it's entirely possible that I've missed something. If I have, go ahead and let me know down below in the comments section. And again, if you want more Destiny lore leading up to the final shape, go ahead and hit subscribe and the bell next to subscribe to turn on those email notifications. For those of you who made it to the end, by the way, I am working this month on completing a complete Story of Destiny Redux, a new video that will cover everything all the way up to the Season of the Wish in preparation for the final shape, so that you can go in with the full context. It will be the biggest video I've ever made on my channel, and it's a little scary. All I ask is you look out for it and support it when it releases. But that's all from me for now, and with that said, know that your viewership as always is quite enough for me, and that in the meantime, my name is Byf. Parodacia ad Astra. I'll see you, Starside.